Greetings. This is Minister Adam Butts with JCC's Sunday School lesson for July 12th, 2020. The title for today's lesson in Boy's Commentary, as well as Townsend Press International Sunday School Commentary, is The Boy Jesus. Hey, if you enjoy our lessons, please let us know by liking, commenting, and subscribing on our posts. To find out more about Jordan Christian Center, a virtual ministry aiming to equip, educate, empower, and encourage the world, please visit us at jordanchristiancenter.com. Sunday School is now in session. Sunday School is now in session. Our unifying topic for today is wisdom that amazed. Our scripture comes from Ecclesiastics chapter 3, verses 1 and 7, and then we skip over to Luke chapter 2, verses 39 through 52. The main thought of today's lesson comes from Luke chapter 2, verse 40, which says, "There the child grew up healthy and strong. He was filled with wisdom, and God's favor was with him." In this lesson, we aim to explore the account of Jesus' experience in the temple at age 12. Imagine the awe experienced by all those who witnessed Jesus' wisdom, as well as Mary and Joseph's anger, and rejoiced in the opportunity to know the wisdom of God. Now, as we do each week, we have a little background before we jump into our lesson today. So today we're in our 6th week of this quarter of the International Sunday School lessons. The first 4 weeks, we explored the wisdom from the book of Proverbs, which of course is written by the great King Solomon earlier in his years. Last week and this week, we'll be exploring the wisdom from the best example ever, Jesus. The first part of the lesson today actually comes out of Ecclesiastics, which many scholars believe that it was written by King Solomon in his later years, where he was more repenting for his transgressions against God. Now, unlike Proverbs, Ecclesiastics' tone was a little more negative, a little more pessimistic, yet is full of practical wisdom. King Solomon, with all the wisdom and riches that God had given him, started to lose favor with God because he began having treaties with foreign countries. He married over 400 women. He started practicing all these other religions. So at this point in Ecclesiastics, King Solomon seemed to be looking back over his life, and that's when he wrote Ecclesiastics. Ecclesiastics shows that certain patterns of life leads to emptiness. This book is meant to help us discover our purpose in life. And Solomon discovered that human wisdom does not contain all of the answers. Knowledge and education has its limits. And we have to understand that in life, we make choices, and we have to make the right choices. And in order to do that, we need the wisdom of God. The second part of our lesson today, and it's actually the main part, we're talking about the only credible story of Jesus in his youth. Jesus is studying and learning and asking about wisdom, and that wisdom of his heavenly Father. As our main thought stated, Jesus grew and became strong with wisdom and with the favor of God as it rests upon him. So let's jump into our lessons today, starting with Ecclesiastic 3, verses 1 and 7, which reads, "For everything there's a season, a time for every activity under the heaven." Verse 7 says, "A time to tear down and a time to mend. A time to be quiet and a time to speak." Solomon tells us that God has a plan for our lives and is full of cycles. And each cycle, we have to work during the cycles. We can't just take breaks as we go through life. We have to work out our purpose as we go through these different cycles in life. If we think about it, let's say from a farming perspective, there's something to do in each season when it comes to farming, whether it's winter, summer, spring, or fall. In the springtime, it is the time to put the crops in the ground. During this time, they have to make sure there's no frost on the ground so the seed can go in a nice soft ground and begin to bud. In the summer, when summer rolls around, it's time to fertilize and use the pesticides and to check the condition of the fields. Then fall comes around and smiles are all about, because now is the time to reap what they've sown. The rewards of all of their hard work now comes in the fall season when they begin to reap. But then we have another season, and that's winter. When winter comes and the harvest is all pulled up, now is the time to fix the machinery and do other projects around the around the farm, because it couldn't be done earlier as you was planting and reaping. Also, during this winter time is also a time to get a little rest before repeating the same cycle the next year. The key thing here is there's work to do in each season. And just like there's work to do on a farm, there's work to do in each season of our lives. In this life, there will be happiness, there will be sadness, there will be death and birth, good and evil. But as children of God, we have to continue to push forward and complete our purpose in life regardless of the season. We have to walk out our faith in season and out of season. So Ecclesiastics 3 continues between verses 2 and 6, and it says there's a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh. And when we get down to verse 7, it says there's a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak. So a time to tear, that is something that the Israelites would do when they were in mourning, when someone has passed or something tragic has happened or they're angry, they would tear their clothes. But on the other hand, it says there's a time to mend. There's a time for healing in these moments, a time to rejoice, a time to get over these mourning the dead, a time to get over being mad. There's a time to start enjoying life. Verse 7 ends with saying that there's a time to be quiet and there's a time to speak. But you know what? The question is, how do we know the difference between times? How do we know when to speak and when to keep quiet? How should we know when to build up versus tearing down and starting over again? The answer is in the wisdom of God, which helps us discern when to speak and when to shut up. As a matter of fact, when it comes to our tongue, and I believe that's why that verse is highlighted, a time to keep quiet and a time to speak, is because the evil that comes out of our tongue at times. James chapter 3 verses 5 through 8 actually says, in the same way, the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set up a great forest on fire. And among all the parts of the body, the tongue is a flame of fire. It is a whole world of wickedness, corrupting the entire body. It can set our whole life on fire, for it is set on fire by hell itself. People can tame animals, and we can tame birds and reptiles and fish, but no one can tame the tongue. It is relentless and evil, full of deadly poison. This is what James has to say about the tongue. He mentioned the difficulties in taming our evil tongues. The task of being slow to speak and quick to listen comes only with the wisdom that's found in God. One which requires us to surrender our desires for that which God desires. Solomon seemed to present the seasons of life in such a poetic manner, yet it casts a dark shadow because it reminds us of the inevitability of trouble, of evil, and the relentless flatness of life. I mean, these things should not come as a surprise to us as we go through the ups and downs of life. But we shouldn't look forward to them. I mean, who wants to look forward to death, even though we know at someday we will die? We shouldn't look forward to that because we have to work in our current season. who look forward to the death of their loved ones and look for hurt, harm, and pain in our life. We're not to look forward to that, but we do understand there is a time for that. But there's also a time for mending and healing. This is what King Solomon is getting across here in Ecclesiastics. Now, Jesus, on the other hand, says in Matthew 36:34, he says, "So don't worry about tomorrow, for today will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today." We can't sit around and worry about all these other things. We have to go about the work of the kingdom regardless of the season. But know that just as there's a daytime full of brightness and hope, there's a competing nighttime full of doom and gloom. We have to enjoy the good and endure the bad, knowing that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. We will find in our lesson today how Jesus knew when to speak and when to keep quiet as he's doing and going throughout this season of his human life. Our lesson then skips down from Ecclesiastics to Luke. Now, Luke is the disciple of Jesus who is the only Gentile to write a book in the New Testament. Luke is a doctor. He's a historian. He wrote both the book of Luke and Acts. He put a great emphasis on dates and details. Luke's accounts of Jesus was focused on Jesus' relationship with people. He stressed prayer and miracles and angels throughout the book. While all the other Gospels, just as Luke recounts Jesus' birth, his death, his burial, and resurrection, only Luke mentioned Jesus as a boy aged 12. In the second chapter of Luke, Luke recounts the birth of Jesus, and it's the only recorded record of the boy Jesus. It's the first account of Jesus actually speaking before he began his ministry at age 30 after being baptized by John the Baptist. See, Jesus shows us that there's a time to speak and there's a time to keep quiet. Jesus, even as the Son of God, experienced all the things that comes with being a human. As Solomon mentioned in Ecclesiastics, there's seasons and times for everything in Jesus' life. And Jesus went through them in order to empathize with us before dying on the cross for us. Jesus experienced a season in which he was born and depended on his mother Mary's nurturing. He experienced a season like we're talking about today where he had to grow in wisdom and stature. He experienced a season where he began his ministry. There was a season where he was performing miracles and raising some from the dead. But then there was a season when he had to die and be buried and was resurrected. So let's hop on to our lesson today, the boy Jesus. We're going to start over here in Luke chapter 2, verses 39 and 40, which read, "When Jesus' parents fulfilled all the requirements of the law of the Lord, they returned home to Nazareth in Galilee. There, the child grew healthy and strong, and he was filled with wisdom, and God's favor was on him." So Mary and Joseph, the parents of the boy Jesus, had to complete the requirements of God under the law before they can return home. So what are those requirements? Well, let's talk about them. First of all, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, the shepherds actually came and visited him. We hear about this, about the birth of Jesus. But then on the 8th day, Jesus had to be named and circumcised, which symbolically separated the Jews from the Gentiles, as well as their unique relationship with God. Now, as the firstborn, the law required his parents to present Jesus at the temple the first month after his birth. This is recorded when God told Moses in Exodus 13:2, which reads, "Dedicate me every firstborn among the Israelites. The first offspring to be born of man and animals belong to me." So presenting their child in the temple shows the firstborn belongs to God. And we know Jesus definitely belongs to God. But at the same time, this requirements also required the mother to go through a purification process as well. Their purification process lasted 40 days if they gave birth to a son, and 80 days if they gave birth to a daughter. So during this time, the mother could not enter the temple. At the conclusion of the purification process, the parents had to take a lamb and a dove. The lamb was used as a burnt offering, and the dove was used as a sin offering. So once Joseph and Mary completed all that was required by the law, they was able to return to Galilee. Now we find through the book of Matthew, it lets us know that there were some detours as they headed back to Galilee because of the dangers that was presented there. So they actually had to go to Egypt. But overall, they made it back to Galilee, where Jesus grew stronger. But this is an example that Jesus did not come to abolish the law. But as we can see today, his parents started with him by fulfilling the requirements of the law. And we know Jesus came to fulfill the law. Now, verse 40 says, Jesus grew in stature and strength. He was filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. Jesus, as I mentioned, experienced the full human experience. So while he was God and he was all-knowing, as a human, he had to grow, he had to learn just like we do. His body grew as well as his wisdom matured. We find in Proverbs 1:7, fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, is the beginning of wisdom. And the boy Jesus had to develop in each aspect of his life in preparation for fulfilling his God-given assignment. In the same way, we have to grow in every aspect of our lives in order to fulfill our God-given assignments. So there's a season where we actually grow and we actually mature and increase in stature and increase in wisdom, all in order that we may get ready for our God-given assignment. The promise of Jesus was prophesied in the Old Testament. First came the prophecy, then comes the promise. But there's another step, there's another part to this that we love to leave out. And that's the process. The boy Jesus was prophesied. And in our lesson today, we find him going through the process before the promised redemption that he gives us through his death, his burial, and his resurrection. The promise God made to you and the promise God made to me will be fulfilled, but we cannot skip past the process. It's the process that will cause us to mature physically and spiritually, and also grow in relationship with God in order to be able to handle the impending promise. As we move down to verse 41 and 42, it says, every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. When Jesus was 12, they attended the festival as usual. So each year, Mary and Joseph would travel with a caravan of family to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover as well as the festival of unleavened bread. The Passover is an annual celebration remembering the fact that God rescued the Jews from bondage when they were enslaved in Egypt. As a matter of fact, Exodus 12, God told Moses that he was going to kill the firstborn of the Egyptians. Moreover, in order for the firstborn of the Jews not to be killed, they would have to smear the blood of a lamb over their doorposts. So, being passed over because of the blood of the lamb, no Jewish child was killed that night. And the next 7 days they were to eat unleavened or yeast-free bread as they left Egypt and headed towards the promised land. The Passover and the festival of unleavened bread was something that was and still is celebrated each year in the Jewish culture. But this year we're talking about, Jesus was 12, And when they attended the Passover festival, this was a little different than all the other years that they attended. Now, notice here, Luke mentioned that Jesus was 12. See, we can't just pass over numbers in the Bible. We have to look at them for their meaning. The number 12 represents governmental foundation. 12 symbolizes God's power and authority. It also symbolizes completeness. So at age 12, Jesus was still a child on the precipice of being recognized as an adult. This happens at age 13 for boys with their bar mitzvah in the Jewish culture. So notice here, Jesus' parents is taking him to the festival. They must have taught him about all these religious traditions. And based on Jesus' communications with the religious leader later on in his lesson, they must have taught Jesus about God and all that God has done for the Jewish people. See, we too have to teach our children in the way that they should go. We have to teach them to fear nothing more than God. We have to teach them to honor God and to dedicate time to give God, to establish a relationship with God. This is what Jesus' parents, Mary and Joseph, is teaching him as he grows from being a child up until this point where he's 12 years old. In verse 43 and 44, which reads, after the celebration was over, they started home to Nazareth. But Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not miss him at first, but because they assumed that they were among the other travelers. But when he didn't show up that evening, they started looking for him among their relatives and friends. The journey to back to Nazareth from Jerusalem, we find is about 64 miles. So this caravan of people, they would typically walk on average about 10 miles a day. So the journey took anywhere between 4 and 7 days. The problem was, when they started back, Jesus stayed behind. His parents didn't notice his absence, probably because when they traveled to these festivals in Jerusalem, people traveled, again, in large groups. And they did this to protect themselves from all the different robbers and bandits that may, try to take them over. Now, it was customary for the women and children to walk towards the front for this week-long journey, and the men will walk towards the back. So Jesus, being 12 years old, he could fit in either group, the women and children up front or the men towards the back. So both Mary as well as Joseph might have thought that Jesus was with the other one. But when that evening came and it was time for them to pitch a tent and settle down, Jesus was nowhere to be found. I found that interesting because it was pretty easy to lose focus on Jesus. Where was Jesus? And it's interesting how we can easily lose focus on Jesus when we simply assume that he's near us. We can go about our lives doing what we like when we like. And sometimes we do so up into the manner that we just doing what we want to do whenever we want, and we fail to notice that Jesus is absent in our lives. He's absent in our decisions and in our thoughts. And if we don't look closely, we may get to the point that he's absent when we attempt to pray. And our prayers begin to be in vain because we don't have a mindset for God. 2 Chronicles 7:14 lets us know that God will answer our prayers, but he only do this, it says, when my people who are called by my name humble themselves, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear them from heaven and forgive their sins. So if we forget about Jesus or Jesus' absence in our prayers and our meditations and our study, who are we praying to? We have to be cognizant of, is Jesus in our mix? We have to have our mind focused on Jesus in all aspects of our life. Otherwise, we too will have to turn back and find Jesus. When we look at verses 45 and 46, which says, when they couldn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem to search for him. 3 days later, they finally discovered him in the temple, sitting among the religious teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. All who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. So, when they couldn't find Jesus, they went back to where they left him. And sometimes in life, we may find that we left Jesus behind somewhere as well. And when we're searching for our purpose in life, instead of seeking the kingdom first, and we decide that we want to lean on our own understanding, we tend to leave Jesus behind. But when this happened, we have to do exactly what the parents of Jesus did. We have to go back to where we left Jesus. We have to go back to reading his word. Go back to fellowshipping with other Christians. Go back to praying and fasting. Go back to surrendering to God. Go back to where we left Christ. As for Mary and Joseph, it took them 3 days to find Jesus. Now, again, we're dealing with numbers here. The number 3 means completeness, perfection, and resurrection. So, Jesus was out of his parents' sights for 3 days, and on the 3rd day, they saw him again there in the temple. From Jesus' death, where he was out of the sight of all that believed in him, to the resurrection, where he could be seen again, there was 3 days. And on that 3rd day, he was seen again by the apostles and the 500 brethren and Cephas. And 3 years after that, he was even seen by Paul. So we find here that they find Jesus sitting in the midst of the doctors and the rabbis. See, during Passover, the most scholarly rabbis will come from all throughout the land, and they will meet up and discuss the great truths among themselves. See, according to Luke, Jesus sat right there in the midst of them, not just listening, but contributing to the discussion and asking questions. The scripture says that all were amazed by Jesus' questions and his answers. See, I've trained quite a few people over the year on software. And I've found that the more in-depth their questions were, the more understanding that they had about the content that we were going over. It wasn't just about them remembering what they learned and how to do it. They understood it to the point that they actually had insight to add to the discussion. Here, Jesus wowed the best of the best rabbis because first, he knew the law, and moreover, he understood the law very, very well. That amazement wasn't so much about Jesus' age, it was about his wisdom and applying his knowledge of his Father. This was the first time in the Bible that Jesus actually spoke. Here, Jesus modeled exactly what we learned in Ecclesiastic 3:7. It was a time for him to speak. Amongst all of these rabbis, amongst all of these religious leaders, now was the time for Jesus to speak up in this temple with the rabbis and everyone else in awe of his understanding of his Father. But the rabbis and the onlookers, they weren't the only ones that was astonished by Jesus' understanding and his answer. So too was his parents. Now, we know from the Bible that as an adult, Jesus goes on to die and save us who believed in him. But at this point, Jesus' parents saw their 12-year-old boy. And both Mary and Joseph were shocked at Jesus' knowledge of the law. But Mary was confused at the same time. So as we look down at verses 48 and 50, which says, his parents didn't know what to think. Son, his mother said to him, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been frantic, searching for you everywhere. But why do you need to search? Jesus asked. Don't you know that I must be about my Father's house or about my Father's business? But they didn't understand what he meant. See, Mary, as any parent, had mixed emotions when she found her son after missing for 3 whole days. Remember, one of the reasons they traveled in large group was because robbers were around. This journey was a treacherous one. Mary was happy to see her son. She was astonished in the knowledge of the law that Jesus displayed, but she was upset at the same time. Most parents know that feeling, and we kind of jokingly say, man, if you make it out of this, child, I'm going to kill you myself. We're mad, but we're happy to see our child at the exact same time. So Mary asked Jesus, how can you do this to your parents? They were worried sick about him. But Jesus' response was one that seemed a little belligerent, but at the same time, it would seem very wise. One hand belligerent, the other hand a little wise. Why do you search for me, he asked. Didn't you know that I must be in my Father's house? I like the way the King James Version says, how is it that you sought me? Once ye not that I must be about my Father's business? Saying that, I can hear my mother now. Boy, if you don't get in this car. But see, Mary and Joseph, they're raising a special child, the Messiah, the Son of the Most High. See, when parents raise special children, it's a little different. For example, Stephen Hardaway Morse, aka Stevie Wonder, was a child prodigy who played several instruments and had the ability to write, produce, perform, and sing songs at a very, very young age. By age 13, he was the youngest artist to top both the R&B and pop charts at the same time. Oh, and by the way, he was also blind shortly after he was born. And in today's lesson, we see Jesus' wisdom and insight made him stand out among the temple leaders. And now we're not talking about a musical genius here. We're talking about the Messiah. Jesus knew at this age that he has a purpose, he has a calling, and he has a destiny. He knew who his father with a capital F was, and more than likely, he also knew that his mother was visited by an angel, and this angel told her that God will put a seed inside her. So, Jesus seemed to be just as surprised with Mary's question as Mary was surprised with Jesus' answer. Of all the people, Mom, you should know that I must be about my Father's business, my heavenly Father's business. You should know that that a son stays in his Father's house. See, Jesus' reaction here shows that he recognized that his relationship with God, his heavenly Father, was more important than his relationship with his earthly parents. Yet, despite this clarification from Jesus, Mary and Joseph, they didn't understand what young Jesus was talking about at the time. See, up until that point, Jesus was probably like many other 12-year-olds, playing in the yard and doing all these different things. But now, he's more mature in size, in wisdom, and in favor of the Lord. He now sees his divine nature. So, Jesus basically said, you may not have known where I was, but I was right where I was supposed to be. See, sometimes we actually have to leave the crowd to go get a word from God. Sometimes we have to go a different route than everybody else to do what God requires of us. Just like Jesus, our relationship with our Heavenly Father have to surpass all other relationships that we have in our lives. God must be first in our lives. We have to seek first the kingdom, and all these other things will be added unto us. In our final verses, as we look at verse 51 and 52, which reads, Then he returned to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. And his mother stored up all these things in her heart. 52 says, Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and all the people. Again, Jesus came to fulfill the law, not abolish it. The law says, honor thy mother and thy father. And while Jesus has a heavenly Father, just like we do, before Jesus started his ministry, he was a carpenter, just like his earthly father, Joseph, because it was customary for the son to take the trade of his father. But while in that temple with the rabbis, it was Jesus' time to speak. But now Now that his parents has come and given him instruction, now was the time for Jesus to be quiet and do what his parents instructed him to do. There will be a time when Jesus began his ministry, like 18 years later. But then was not the time nor the season. And what's good here is, just as good mothers do, Mary kept all of these amazing things that her son did in her heart. She will have to come to terms that her baby boy that she delivered will one day deliver her and the world from sin. Verse 52 says that Jesus continued to gain more knowledge and grew taller. But he also grew in favor of the Heavenly Father and among us as humans. Jesus wasn't so heavenly minded that he was no earthly good. He reflected the love of God and drew others near to him. Jesus wasn't arrogant or selfish. Jesus wasn't self-loathing, and he didn't act like he was holier than thou, even though he was. Jesus was respected by God and mankind alike. At this time, Jesus was in a season of growth, and his maturity was intellectually and in practical holiness. His wisdom and understanding wowed everyone at age 12, but the world hadn't seen anything yet. To fully empathize with his creation, Jesus experienced all types of heavenly growth so he would be able to fully be prepared to fulfill his heavenly mission. Throughout his life as a human, he was able to identify with those whom he came to seek and save. The perfect Lamb of God had to resemble those whom he had come to lay down his life for. Jesus bled like we bleed. Jesus cried like we cry. Jesus felt pain like we feel pain. Jesus was persecuted like we will be persecuted. Jesus died like we will die. But he got up, so now we can get up too. Our lesson today about boy Jesus should lead us to pray for our youth. Pray that they are led by the wisdom of God and not the foolishness of this world. Pray that they utilize their spiritual gifts and talents that God bestowed upon them. And as adults, we have to make sure that we're not squashing the youth's dreams and passion before they are mature, especially as they seek God. As a matter of fact, in Luke 18:16, it says, "Then Jesus called the children and said to the disciple, 'Let the children come to me. Don't stop them, for the kingdom of God belongs to those who are like these children.'" Amen, brothers and sisters. That concludes our lesson this week. Again, I'm Minister Adam Butts with JCC Sunday School lesson for July 12th, 2020. May God bless you and keep you. Thank you.